Are you gonna set a timer so I know how long I have?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. All
Great.
right. So, welcome everybody. We're about to start our tournament round one, part two. Um, the judges we have for today are Mitch, the scientist, Steven, and Friction. And we will begin by the first debate being Divinity versus Leeman. And they will be debating the proposition moral objectivity is possible without God. And Divinity would be the affirmative, and Leeman would be the negation. And we can start with Divinity's opener, 7-minute opener. And we're ready to start when you say your first word, Divinity.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Let's go. All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me here. Thanks for agreeing to debate me, Leeman. Thanks for Day of Debates, AR, and all the people putting this on. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and just unpack kind of what the requirements of me winning the debate have to be. So the proposition is that moral objectivity is possible without God. Now, understand that is not me having to provide a defense for moral objectivity. Like, I don't have to prove to you that objective morality exists. I have to prove to you that if objective morality is to exist, right, it does not have to be accompanied with the existence of God. I have to prove to you that it is at least logically possible that there can be an objective moral system be true without um, the existence of a God. So, some things that like satisfactorily meet that burden is just straightforwardly denying that there is any contradiction. So, in order for me to win the debate, I just have to straightforwardly deny that there is not, or I have to just deny that there is a contradiction um, that's somehow derived from the existence of objective morality and um, the non-existence of God, or vice versa. So that's kind of my burden of the debate. I don't even have to prove that there is an objective moral system, just that it's consistent with the existence of God. Um, okay, so why do I think that that is obviously true? Well, there's a couple things, right? So the first thing is that let's just take um, one very, very ancient dilemma called the Euthyphro dilemma. And this dilemma kind of illustrates to you that either way we go down the route um, and the belief of God, it kind of leads towards objective morality. So let's say there's a God and a God exists. Well, if something's good in this worldview, if there is a good thing and there's a God, it's either good because God likes that thing, or God wants that thing, or God desires that thing, or commands it to be good. So things are either good because God says they are, or God says that things are good because they're good. So, let's say cheating on your wife, right? That's bad. That's either bad because God said it was bad, or God says it's bad because it is bad. So there's one of two options, right? Either things are good because of divine preference, because of divine subjectivism. Like things are good because of God's preferences. Well, that's not objective in any sense, right? That's actually not objectivity if God says things are good and that's what makes them good. That's subjectivism, right? Um, so that's one alternative if God exists and things are good. The other alternative is that God identifies things that just are already good, which means that things were good independent of God making them good. They simply were good and God recognizes that. In which case, the same can be said of the atheist, right? Like there are just things which are good in the world, and those things that are good in the world are good not because of God, just because of the way they are. Um, and so, I mean, that's just one such thought experiment to say that the existence of God you know, doesn't make it so that there allows objective morality. Actually, in this hypothetical, there are only things that are good because of just the way that things naturally are. Now let's turn to some other forms of moral objectivity to kind of give you more examples. Um, so like the standard interpretation of moral objectivity in the literature is called moral realism, specifically robust realism. This is the view that um, when I say something is good, that there are these kind of non-natural properties, and these non-natural properties are a part of actions or a part of events or a part of someone's character. And in this worldview, those properties, there's nothing about them which necessitates the existence of God for them to exist. For example, imagine I told you there was a world, and that world just had properties that were just irreducibly good or bad. They just simply were. The world just simply had good things and simply had bad things, and that's end of the story. Such a world is possible, right? Like presumably that world is possible, and if that world is possible, then I win the debate. Because if it were impossible, then then I would lose. So if worlds like that are possible, then I win the debate. Um, Similarly, you can take other traditional forms of realism, like naturalism, right? Well, in that worldview, there just is the natural world, and the natural world, of course, things are just good because you're talking about the natural world. And that worldview, moral facts are true objectively, independent of what I think, because it's just about the natural world. The natural world just makes things good, and that doesn't require the existence of God. So yeah, I mean, there is no contradiction in believing in objective morality and not believing in the existence of God. It's not necessitated. And so here's the ultimate burden on my interlocutor. My interlocutor is going to have to demonstrate something insane, and they're not going to be able to do it. And they're going to have to be able to tell me they're going to have to derive the contradiction in being an atheist and believing in objective morality. That's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to derive the contradiction. If they can't derive the contradiction, they lose the debate. That's it. There's no other way for them to negate the B.A.A.S.H. The only way they can win the debate is by proving it's impossible. The only way they do that is by giving me a contradiction. They also have to successfully take down the counterexamples I gave. They have to tell me why moral realism logically requires the existence of God. They have to tell me why that's necessitated by the existence of God, something which they cannot do. Um, Another potential, um, counterexample to their view is a view called relaxed realism. So, relaxed realism is the view that there are moral truths which are just simply good. They're not made true in light of any fact of the world. Well, in such a worldview, goodness doesn't have a truth maker. Propositions are not ontologically committing, which is just to say that there's nothing about the world which makes them true. They just simply are true. Um, well, in that worldview, there's no ontological commitment of the moral statement. So, how exactly would God be required for them? It's like God's like a logically required truth condition of the propositions. That's unclear. So they'd have to overcome. They'd have to explain why that worldview is also literally impossible. So, yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning into this debate. Good luck to my interlocutor. Yeah, here we go.
All right. You conclude your time? Okay. Let me just. All right, Leeman. You're up to go. You have 7 minutes to give your opener. And we start whenever you say your first word.
All right. Well, I thank all the people for attending and for the judges for giving us the opportunity and for AR and everyone else for hosting the debate. I thank Divinity for, the opportunity to consider the matter at hand. The resolution before us is moral objectivity is possible without God. Before, we had already agreed to definitions of what this means so that there's actual benefit in debating this actual debate. What we meant by morality is binding principles, essentially an ought about what humans should do and why they're right or wrong. Objectivity means that these principles, or the rule, it would be universal, unchanging, and independent of human opinion, feeling, or cultural stance. And when we say is possible, of course, as the interlocutor mentioned, possible would mean that it is not logically impossible. And God, from the Islamic paradigm, which I am a Muslim and believe in a God that is necessary, eternal, independent, unchanging, all-powerful, all-knowing, and very important to this debate, has free will. So my case is simple. Moral objectivity, when you want a morality that is an ought to all people, and that they shall do this and shall not do other things, that morality being objective, meaning it is universally true, requires some grounding. And the debate is about, is there a ground or not? And so if there is a ground, my argument would be that ground must be God and cannot be anything other than God, because God is the unchanging source that has free will, that then commands things that then become the moral ought or ought not to do. The Islamic paradigm is basically that everything that God commands at any particular time or instance is what is morally good, and anything that God forbids at a particular time or instance is morally bad. So the grounding is in the command of God itself. Morality has to do with obligation. If morality was just understood as something, as the interlocutor mentioned, as something that just exists or just is or could be, none of that actually give us an explanation for what we ought to do. The scientific worldview or the naturalistic worldview or the worldview of what we live in just tells us what is, or what happens, or if we do this, what will occur according to the patterns that we've seen. But it doesn't describe what we should do or should not do. It only assumes those things based on values or ends that hope to be achieved. But this framework does not tell us why we should attempt to achieve those ends or value the things that are being told to us to value. In the Islamic worldview, an action is good or bad if God commands it, or bad if God forbids it. An action by itself is not good or bad. So to answer the question that was asked, are things good because God commands it? Yes, they're good because God commands it. Are they bad because God forbids it? Yes, they're bad because God forbids it. Why does God forbid anything at all? Because God has the necessary free will, the ability to choose, and thus then command, that then grounds morality within the command of God. Some notices, some caveats that can occur, that morality is something that applies to human actions, not to God's actions. Another note is that morality is something that is interpreted from God's commands, and God's commands are open to interpretation and context and changing upon context. This is the reason that even Muslims or believers in God can disagree about what should be done or what ought to be done or ought not to be done. But we're not talking about the details of those rulings. We're talking about the rule in principle is what ought to be done is what God commands. So at its foundation, morality requires God's commands at its source, and only his command can ground objective morality. We've already discussed, my second argument was that we've already discussed why this is objective, meaning that while the commands change, what does not change is God's unchanging, constant free will. And when we consider the alternatives, this is the argument that we have to show that anything other than God is not objective as a source of morality, as a ground for morality. So if we compare the common alternatives that are given, whether this is empathy or the pursuit of empathy and emotion and sympathy for others, this is disproven by the existence of people that are not sympathetic or empathetic, and they don't have that feeling at all, and so it cannot apply universally. If we go by reason, then reason is based, even if the reasoning is valid, it's based on premises that may not be accepted by all people, leading to the debates between philosophers about what one ought to do or not ought to do. And so we see that reason is something that is constantly debated based on the premises that are accepted or not accepted. We see utilitarianism, which is the idea of maximizing happiness or reducing suffering the most. But no one tells us why we shall reduce suffering the most or increase happiness the most, or why it ought to be pursued at all. If we cover evolutionary scientific methods to understand what allows us to survive, no one tells us that we ought to survive, or or why we ought to survive at all, or to further the species of the human, the preservation or flourishing of the human race. We just see this idea that we ought to survive, but no one tells us why we ought to survive or pursue that. The existence of people that do not value the survival and perpetration of the human race shows us that this is not something that can be universal. In addition to that, just the idea of social contract, that people agree with each other, and that societies agree on whatever is good, therefore it becomes morally good. This would again be a social contract that is subject to time, where people can agree that human sacrifice is good, or slavery is good, and other things are good, and this would be completely subjective. This shows us that there is no alternative. So while my interlocutor is telling me that I must propose a solution where everything is impossible, there is no objectivity presented. There is no actual answer that is given as an objective reason for why someone ought to do or ought not to do anything. Whereas from the Islamic side, where we negate that God is the source, God is the ground that tells us what we ought to do and ought not to do, and this command of God is objectively true at all times. Whatever God commands at a particular time we ought to do, whatever he forbids we ought not to do. This isn't a rule that does not change with time, that does not depend on the people's opinions, that does not depend on anything else, but it is always constant and objectively true. So for these reasons, I urge you to reject the resolution.
And that's time. Okay. That will conclude the openers. And now we start with the 5 minute cross examination. Divinity will start.
Like I start
And
with
when I
asking
start,
questions.
yep, you can start talking or asking questions. You can do whatever with your time. You can reclaim your time whenever you want to,
Okay, cool.
if your interlocutor is speaking.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, this would be
Okay,
the time for you to establish your position or delegitimize your opponent's position.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, neat. Oh, we're going. Okay, yeah, okay. So we're gonna focus. I'll focus this one in on the Euthyphro dilemma. That was the argument I made about how if something is good in an atheist worldview, like what explains it being good, either God's choice in it being good is what makes it good, or it simply was good prior to God's choice, which of course would mean that it's just good independent of God, which makes it objective. So you said that things were good because God commands them, right? Right. Now, my question to you is why does God command one thing over the other?
The command of God comes from his free will.
Why does God freely choose one thing over the other?
God's free will is free by definition and does not depend on any other thing.
No, no, I know, but why? Like the question is like, what explains? So if God says, you said you're a Muslim, right? If God said that it was good for the Prophet Muhammad to have sex with a 13-year-old, like what makes that good? Is it like, why did God choose that that was good as opposed to something else?
God chooses things independently of all things, so external reasons need not apply.
Well, what's the internal reason?
God's free will, that is the reason.
Well, that's not a reason, right? Because if God has free will, then you agree that God could have freely chosen something else, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so why didn't he?
Like we said, when we ask why, the end answer is because God decided so. That's the
Well,
answer.
that's the decision is the consequence of like a reasoning process, right?
Necessarily, we understand God to be, without need, without any end that he needs to achieve. So there's
Is there
nothing that's required for God.
so what there's nothing that explains God's choice of one thing over the other?
The study of what God has decided is a study of what is, or what he has decided, not a study of
Yeah, but
why.
the from God's perspective, like he could have chosen other things but chose not to. But there's nothing which explains why he chose one thing over the other.
We understand this as the ultimate explanation being God himself and his free will.
But it's not God. How is God the explanation of God could have done other things? Like you're saying there's a range of possibilities within God's own choice. Like what explains why why one of those possibilities was chosen over the other?
Right, so that's exactly what we mean by free will when we say that God must necessarily choose whatever he wills independently of all things.
So is it made sorry, I got a call. Sorry. Is it made by consulting preferences?
Not necessarily.
Okay, what is it made by so I'm going to expand my calls now. Holy shit, sorry. Um, so just to clarify, true or false, the choice was made because of divine preference. It's false, right?
It depends what you mean by preference. If by preference you mean some kind of inclination, then no. But if by preference you mean the free will, then yes.
Okay, but is there anything which explains why his free will favors one thing over the other?
No,
There's nothing which explains it.
not that we know of.
Like, is it like when you say there's nothing that explains it, are you saying you don't know that what explains it, but there is something that explains it that you're unaware of? Or are you saying literally it is true that nothing explains it?
That's right. The current model that I think is the most strong is that there is no explanation.
Like, there's
That
literally no
God's free will
explanation.
is God's free will is it is as it is essentially.
So, in terms of explaining the Muslim worldview you gave, right? What do you think is more likely? Do you think that a more likely hypothesis is that there's an explanation behind the choice, or do you think a less like the more likely explanation that there's no explanation?
Behind God's choice?
Yeah.
No, the answer is there is no
So
explanation. There's
I'll
no
ask you this:
external
is it is it
explanation.
is it possible that God chooses to do something else?
Yes,
It's possible,
that's what we mean when we say free will.
but you said that the moral law was unchanging.
I said the moral rule is that we always follow God's commands, and God's commands depend on God's will. And
Yeah, but that you said they were unchanging, right?
God's will is unchanging, but not his commands.
But it could change, right?
God's commands could change, yes.
Okay.
That's time. Okay, now it's Leeman's turn, and you get 5 minutes, Leeman. And we start
Awesome.
whenever you say your first word.
Okay. So Divinity, you were saying that one of the first arguments you brought was it has to be shown logically impossible that objective morality can occur without any God, right?
Yep.
Consider this argument. Premise one: objective morality requires a source of moral obligation that is independent of human opinion, culture, and circumstance. So this means that there is an ought. Okay. Premise two is without God, all possible sources of morality, such as reason, emotion, social consensus, evolution, literally anything else other than God is changing and circumstantial and based on subjectivity. Therefore, without God, there is no source of moral obligation. There's no ground. So, are you saying that there is no ground for morality?
Well, the first thing is that argument doesn't even lead to the conclusion you want it to lead to, because the argument that you just gave has to do with the world that we live in. So if it were like, suppose it were true that the world we lived in was a theist world where God commands moral, it gives moral commandments, and that grounds obligation. If that were true of this world, that doesn't make it that it's impossible that other worlds are not like it. So, I mean, I could concede this argument and it wouldn't generate the conclusion. But if you just want to think about possibility, which is what the proposition, like what we're debating about, um, yeah, the atheist doesn't have to say that everything other than God is unchanging. For example, I could believe in abstract objects being the grounding source of moral obligation, and of course, abstract objects are unchanging because they exist in the world of forms.
So, just to be a little bit more efficient here, do you think that moral objectivity exists?
Yeah, but that's irrelevant to the proposition.
Okay, so you think it exists. So the question, my argument is, if you say that moral objectivity exists without God, then there is no explanation. Like there's no reason why you can show that moral objectivity exists.
All right, I just said one possible explanation is that objective morality is grounded in the world of forms.
Sorry, the world of forms.
Yeah, the world of forms refers to a set of objects which aren't spatiotemporal and ground normative statements. So
Okay,
for example, triangleness is a form and it exists, but it doesn't exist physically, and it grounds triangleness, like it's responsible for the instantiation of triangleness in the world we live in. Similarly, there's a goodness form, and that form is responsible for the instantiation of goodness in the world we live in. So goodness, like the
so
standard for
when
goodness is outside of us, but it's not God.
so divinity, when we say triangleness, we know that it means three sides. But when you say moral goodness, what does that mean?
Well, you can, for example, if I said redness, I can't give you a definition either, but
You can show
nonetheless,
what
it's
it
like a form.
means. So what is an example of moral goodness then?
Uh, being really ambitious,
Why is that morally good?
good because it's grounded by the form.
So by definition, so you just define morality as ambition, and therefore ambition is always good.
Well, no, you're explaining it as if it's good because of my definition stipulation. I'm telling you the form is such that that activity is good, and then I'm just reporting to
Why?
you what that is.
Why is it such that ambition is good?
I can ask you the same thing. It's for the same reason that ambition is good, that God chooses to allow, the Prophet Muhammad to have sex with 13-year-olds. It's just as arbitrary.
No, this is we're analyzing your worldview.
No, I'm
You
saying
say
I'm
that,
saying it's the same reason. Like the explanation you gave me for why the Prophet Muhammad allows this, or for why God commands those things, is the same reason for why goodness includes being productive and being ambitious.
and what is that reason?
You said there was no reason, right? Just simply
Okay,
is. You said
so
it simply is the way it is.
right.
It
So
just is that way. Yeah.
when we speak about God, we say about God that God has is a moral necessity and is what it is.
Yeah.
But
The
when
form
we
just is
talk
what it is.
about this form is what it is.
Yep. The form is
Why?
what it is.
So there's no reason to say why it is this way or not another way.
Yeah. The forms explain everything else. The forms have no explanation.
How do you know that the form is this way?
I have epistemic access through my intuition.
Such as?
What are you asking for an example of an intuition?
Yeah. So how do you know that this moral ambition is good?
Well, I reflected upon my knowledge of the concept of good, and then I said, "Oh yeah," after consulting all the
How
cases,
did you even
that
come
best
across the
explains.
concept of good?
I encountered a bunch of different cases,
Such as?
such as people being productive and then people being lazy,
But why ought people be productive?
because it's grounded in the forms.
And why is the form grounded?
The form has no explanation for its grounding.
This is circular. Yeah, I mean, we can see
Is
how
it
this is
circular?
circular. Yeah, you're just saying it
All
is.
right.
I'm,
Now, second. So now, second round of rebuttals.
yeah.
Divinity starts whenever you say first word.
Yeah, I'm happy that we brought up circularity because what I just did with the forms is a parody to what you did with the existence of God, where I say that there is this entity which exists, which grounds moral statements. And then when I asked for an explanation as to why that thing grounds these particular things as good or bad, you said there is no explanation, to which I also said the same thing. And then you called it circular, right? Now, the difference between my circularity and your circularity is the circularity of what I'm saying is just circular in terms of how I know those things. It's not like circular in let's say like a metaphysical way. So like in your worldview, you're talking about God choosing one thing as a commandment over the other. So if I ask why God chooses to do one thing over the other, you're just saying he chooses to do it, and there is just no explanation. Now, presumably, any under any definition of the term choice, I understand that like when you choose something, it's because you have that's a demonstration of preference. But you're not saying that preference explains it. So I'm just gonna ask you, what makes it so that my world, like the hypothetical worldview I just gave, where goodness is grounded in the forms, what makes that worldview impossible?
What you're proposing is that people ought to do something, and you're saying they ought to do because of some form, but there's no reason for the form to be as it is,
Well, the
nor
form,
how
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
What's the contradiction?
nor
Is what I'm asking you.
nor do you know why the form is this way, right? You're just saying it just is. But
Uh-huh.
when this is different from God's commands, in that God actually, like, we have reasons to believe that God commands things. We have reasons to believe that these
I
are the
asked you what
commands.
I just want to clarify. I asked what the contradiction was, and you're not giving me that.
Right. So your position is that people ought to do something because of some form. But I'm going to ask you, why is this form true? You say there is no reason. Is that right?
I said there was no explanation for why the form is good.
Sorry, the form itself defines
Look,
goodness, right?
I'm still not getting an answer to my question. So I want you to tell me. So I have two propositions. The first proposition is objective morality exists. And the second proposition is atheism is true. Now I want you to tell me the proposition and its negation that I'm committed to if I accept both of those statements. What is the contradiction? Like I want you to formally represent the contradiction you think I'm committing.
Right. So objective morality requires a ground. Atheism rejects that ground.
Okay, by ground, what do you mean?
Something that is a basis of moral ought.
And you're saying forms can't be a basis of moral law?
You have nothing. I mean, I don't know. I'm totally unfamiliar with what you even mean by forms. And when I ask you about these forms, there's little explanation.
Okay. I mean, it's okay that there's little explanation for this concept, but like you're saying, it's impossible.
No, so what do you mean by forms?
I told you a form is an abstract object. It's an object which isn't spatio-temporal.
Okay, so does it exist
It's an
independently?
yeah, it's an unchanging, independent existing item.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, that's our definition of God.
no, it's not because it's not all powerful, it's not all knowing. I didn't say that the form was all knowing and all powerful. I said that the
You just
form
don't
was
know
an
that it's
unchanged.
all powerful and all knowing. It very well could be.
No, I'm telling you, suppose there's a world where there's this thing that is not that. I'm not
No,
describing. See, this is
that's
you keep equivocating between the way the world is and the way it could be. The
uh-huh.
resolution of the debate is that it's impossible. What I'm saying is now whether what I'm saying is true is a completely different matter. I'll tell you right now what I'm saying isn't true. Forms don't exist. But if they did
Mhm.
exist, you think it's impossible that forms exist and create the grounds for
Yeah, so
morality.
if these forms were independent, so our definition of God is such that the definition of God is such that it is necessary, eternal, independent, unchanging, all powerful, all knowing. So you're just saying that this God of yours, that you're calling a
It's not
form,
a god. It's an abstract object.
I gotcha. God is also an abstract object. So
God is an abstract object, uh-huh.
this God of yours is necessary, eternal, independent, unchanging, but is not all powerful and all knowing,
Yeah, it's
right?
not personal.
Okay. So basically, what you're describing is God.
No, it's not basically God because the way you define God is personable. This thing isn't personable. It's just an item in existence.
Personable is not one of the qualities that we agreed upon as a definition.
Personable subsumes all knowing, all powerful, all good. Like that's what you're describing right now. Is like a conscious being. That's not what I'm talking about.
I think this might be confusing, like a Christian, more anthropomorphic understanding of God as
No,
opposed
with what you just said, the object I'm positing is not all knowing. It does not have a consciousness. It does not have knowledge.
right. What we mean is knowing all possibilities and their consequences and
Yeah,
knowledge.
yeah. That's not what the form I'm positing is.
Okay. This idea of this form that would is this form the creator of all things?
No,
What is it?
I just told you.
So you're basically describing a half god, a god that has some of God's attributes but not some of God's attributes.
That's like if I said you're describing a half fire truck because it has the property of existing, and fire trucks have the property of existing. Like, yeah, it has similarities insofar as it exists. True. It has similarities insofar as that it's abstract and non-physical. Like, yeah, the thing I'm describing is mystical. That doesn't make it God.
Okay. Is the time up there? I guess we can go to the next cross examination, which would be Leeman. It's going to be 5 minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay, just want to say at the end of it, if you reject God, then at the end of it, you do end up something that's very similar to God anyway. That's I'm probably done with that part of the conversation. But this shows, one of the arguments that you had, Divinity, was are things good because God said so, or bad because God said so? And I think I answered that question, so we can probably move on from that, right?
Well, I don't. Are you asking me if I think you adequately answered it?
Hmm.
No.
In the sense that you think that there's nothing grounding God's will, therefore there's a problem.
Oh, the fact that there's nothing grounding God's will, or there's no explanation, makes me believe that it's subjective because it's arbitrary. Like you're
Subjective to
telling me
what?
there's a God. Like there's God as a divine subject who arbitrarily chooses one thing over another, and that's what makes something good.
That's
That's
exactly what we
subjectivism.
mean. I mean, that's
Yeah,
exactly what we mean by free will.
that's
Um,
divine subjectivism. That's what I'm saying. That's not objective morality.
what we mean, the position I'm trying to clarify is that what we mean by objective is objectively do whatever God commands, and God's command is dependent, is subjective to God's free will,
Yeah,
which
subjective.
must objectively be free, essentially.
That's subjective. Yeah.
Okay. Argument three: moral robustness. Things are good just because they are. Again, this is all just referring back to the idea that is somewhat similar to God to begin with. This is exactly what we mean when we say God, right? Something that they just
No,
are moral truths. What makes these things morally true?
the form.
Again, going back to the same idea about something that's almost like God, right?
It's
Just
not
using
almost like you keep saying all these terms, so you're trying to like make the jump that it is God. I like very clearly laid out that it's not.
It's not that it is God. It's something that is almost the same as God,
It's
meaning
not
having.
almost the same. It has relevant differences. That's like saying trucks are almost like SUVs because their vehicle is made of metal and they're big. Like they're
I
not. They're
got
not SUVs.
consider the other possibilities that you've given. Natural morality. I think I might have missed. What did you mean by natural morality?
That means that moral statements refer to natural facts, and that
Okay,
those statements are true.
so what causes these natural facts?
What do you mean by causes?
What, like you're saying that there are the natural causes that ground morality. What are these natural causes?
No, no. The whole point is that moral statements are about natural facts.
Okay, so it's only aboutness. It's not about oughtness.
No, the oughtness is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could be an analytic descriptivist, and that's still objective morality.
Right, but by our definition of morality, it has to do with what you ought to do or ought not to do.
Yeah, but moral semantics is reduced descriptively, so you still ought to do these things. It's just the semantic reduction for the term ought isn't irreducible. It reduces to natural facts.
So what's really happening? Ought you do them or ought you not do them?
You say what?
Is there an actual ought or not?
Yeah, there's an ought, and the ought is semantic reducible down to natural facts. There's not a
So,
sui generis. There's not a sui generis concept or property called oughtness, which exists in the world in a naturalist worldview.
okay,
That's
so
fine.
there is no ought.
There is an ought. Yeah,
Sorry, there is or is not an ought.
there is an ought. It's just not the same kind of ought that you want.
Okay, and what is that ought?
Well, if you're a naturalist, you could say a lot of different things, right? You could say it's reducible down to um, facts about what creates the most aggregate pleasure, whatever.
Why
But
should
I
we
mean,
value pleasure?
that's just what the terms mean. I mean, the question's a little confused. Like that's just what the semantic theory means. This is like if I said modus ponens is an inferential classical logic, and then you said, why is it an inferential classical logic? It's like, well, just given what classical logic is, it is an inferential. There's no evaluation beyond that.
Okay, to me that just sounds like there is no ought, or if there is an ought, the ought is just the description itself, which doesn't sound like an ought.
Well, yeah, because you're presupposing the standard of oughtness, which I don't. I mean, you're just kind of asserting, which is that oughts have to be sui generis and irreducible in nature. I don't know why anybody should accept that.
Didn't we define morality as binding principles that obligate and distinguish between right and wrong?
Yeah, you can understand the binding principles that distinguish between right and wrong descriptively. You don't have to think about them
But
as
then they
irreducible.
don't they distinguish, but they don't obligate then.
It'd be obligated. The term obligation is semantically reduced in the way that I'm talking about.
All right. So the final thing that you mentioned, relaxed realism. Maybe we'll talk about it in the next round. Relaxed realism is things aren't really good at all; they just are. Again, this is not objective, nor is it really
That's
moral.
not that's not what relaxed realism is. Things are good.
Maybe we'll talk about it in the next round then.
Okay. Was it my time now?
Uh,
Okay.
Okay, he's conceding his time, I think. All right.
Okay.
and also, I think we have like a echo.
Yeah, I think that's Leeman, or maybe it's probably Leeman.
All right. So in light of that, then I'm just gonna get right in here. Okay. So to clarify again, the burden of the debate is you have to prove that it is literally impossible. So all of your arguments they have to do with that it's not true. I can grant you that it's not true that we live in a world in which it's explained by such and such, but that's not the burden. Your burden is to say that no world could ever exist where it's explained. So if I'm going to go back to this. Suppose there was a world where there were forms, and the forms were one of the forms was goodness, and the goodness form explains and instantiates the properties of goodness and all these different scenarios and actions, right? Now, remember, the goodness form is not God. It's not all knowing. It doesn't know things. It doesn't create the universe. It's not anything like that. It's just a special kind of item that exists in this universe. In this hypothetical world, you have to say that it's impossible, that the world I just described is impossible. And so I'm going to ask you again, what is the proposition and its negation that someone who accepts this world is committed to?
In this world, in this theoretical world where a form exists, is that form, does it exist?
In the world where the form exists, it exists, yes.
Okay. Does it exist always?
Yes.
Is it eternal?
Yes.
Is its existence necessary?
Yep.
Yeah, that's our definition of God.
No, it's not, because you think that God creates the universe. You also think God knows everything. You also think God is all powerful.
God doesn't, so in our definition, God doesn't necessarily create the universe.
True or false to God? The definition of God you gave me is that God creates the universe.
We
It's
have
true.
nothing about creation in the definition.
True or false? The definition of God that you gave me is that God is all knowing.
Yes.
All right, this thing I'm describing is not all knowing. It's not God.
So it doesn't know anything?
Yeah, it's not. It's not. It's not conscious.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So given the hypothetical I just gave you, what makes that impossible?
Hmm. Yeah, so you're saying that the form would exist that just obligates oughts, but is not God.
Yep.
But this doesn't exist in the real world, it just exists theoretically.
Yeah, it's a hypothetical world.
Yeah, I mean, could be, I don't know. I mean, when we can think about God, we think that God knows things because God is the creator of all things. Well, okay, so this thing exists necessarily. Nothing is uncreated.
It's uncreated.
Hmm. And hang on. So, okay, so in this world, it exists necessarily, but there's nothing else. Let's say it's just this.
Yeah. I'll see you later. Bye. Sorry. What was your question?
Is there anything else to be known in this scenario?
No, I think all that's required to analyze the impossibilities, what I just described.
Okay. Is there knowledge at all?
There doesn't have to be.
Sorry?
That's irrelevant to the stipulation of the hypothetical.
I see. Um, but it's in a possible world. It's not in this world, though.
Yeah, it's just a possible world.
Mhm. But why does that obligate us? So if this form exists, why does it obligate us?
Because I'm telling you, in this world, it is the ground for good. You have to tell me why that's impossible.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, maybe we would change, this definition in this possible world where God doesn't know anything because there's nothing to be known, or God doesn't create anything because there's nothing that is created. It just is God. In that way, this would be God.
It's not given the way you define God.
So maybe if the world doesn't exist and there's nothing to be known, or if in this world there's nothing to be controlled other than the existence itself, that would be God.
It's not God because you define God and you defined it as something other than what I just told you.
I understand, but in that other world, in
In
that
that
other
other world, it's
possible,
still not God because of the way you define God.
yeah, I mean, this would necessitate then having to re-understand what we mean by God, right? It
Nope,
would be
we have
necessary.
the same meaning of the term God that you gave originally, right?
Mhm.
And we're looking at this world. There is no God, and there's no contradiction. So the affirmative is true, and the negative is false.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just messed up the definitions then.
All right, that's a concession. Look, I gotta get out of here. Got the concession. I don't need a closing statement. I just got a concession. So thanks everyone for hosting this. Have a good rest of your night.
Oh,
Okay.
he's got to do. Oh, okay.
He had to go. He had to go.
Okay, that's totally
All right.
fine.
I mean,
I think
we
we.
could judge the debate like this. It's fine. We'll just go to the
Uh,
judges now.
does Leeman want to do like a closing statement, or
Oh,
do we
hey,
just?
Lehman, do you want to do a closing statement?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Do the closing statement, and then we get to the judging. We'll do that.
yep.
right.
You get 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much.
that's fine.
All right. Based on the definitions that we had, perhaps I made a mistake in the way that we defined God, because in this theoretical world, in this possible world where there's nothing to be known, where there's nothing to be controlled other than God itself, in that case, if that was an understanding about God, then I don't know that I can find a logical contradiction in that. But as far as this world is concerned, our world, where we do not have an evidence of such an existence that would be, existing in some way, we would reach the conclusion that moral objectivity is possible without God would be in the negative. We've shown that there is no actual explanation that can be proven, even though the interlocutor wanted to show an existence of God that would be a little bit a different understanding of what God is in this worldview, in our existence, that cannot prove the existence of any other such being or thing that exists. Morality requires an ought, an obligation, and that obligation comes from God, the one who is existent, eternal, independent, and necessary, and has free will. Dropping the first proposed definitions of all-knowing and all-powerful as shown by the interlocutor. God's necessary free will then secures the grounding of this world, and God exists necessarily and has free will. Therefore, alternative explanations for what we ought to do, such as reason, emotion, utilitarianism, evolution, social contract, and all of the other proposed explanations without God, as now I guess more properly defined, would be subjective, fragile, and always changing and without any ground. So what we're saying is, without God, there is no morality is just opinion, it's convention, it's human instinct, it's anything else. But with God, morality is obligation to God's commands, to do what God commands, and to stay away from what God forbids. And for that reason, I would say to vote negative, essentially.
Be conceding the rest of your time. That's it. Okay, Cool. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our first debate. I do want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you guys. There are 3 more debates. Judges, now would be your time to like gather your scores and let me know if you want to present them now or later. We are going to do like audience comments, questions, critiques, and concerns, and then we'll move on to the next debate. AR, what time do we got the next debate at? 20 minutes until
It's at 7.
okay. So
like,
we got about
20
30 minutes for comments, questions, concerns. And yeah, judges, are you ready, or should we give you some time?
Friction said he needs a few minutes in the chat.
Okay,
He
go
said
ahead.
we could do audience. I mean, we could do audience questions.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment I would like to make.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say is I actually think, okay, so given who Leeman was debating, Liam, and given the topic, like that I think that he took a position that's obviously wrong and was debating one of the best debaters on the app. I actually don't think Leeman did that bad considering those two things. So I just want to say that I think Leeman did a pretty good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your candor. I also think Leeman did pretty good.
Yeah, I actually had a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say that I think Leeman did well to present his position. He appeared to be very clear and concise what his view was. I did have a concern, though, since Liam left early, he didn't give much of a closing statement. So I'm not sure how that will affect the score, but perhaps we could talk about that later. I'm not sure.
Wait, AR, did he tell you beforehand that he might have to leave like mid-debate because he was busy or something?
He told me that today.
Okay. I guess like I would say he did tell us that he would have to leave, so I would say try to judge it to the best of your ability. Technically, like leaving before the end of the debate would probably be like a forfeit, but like I mean, life happens. He's busy, so I wouldn't do that. So I would say judges. I would say try to judge it the best that you can.
Okay.
But yeah.
Question. Leeman, just so that everybody understands, were you aware prior to the debate that there are entire schools of moral realists that don't come from theism, or is this your first time, like in real time in the debate, hearing about them, like naturalism and non-naturalist views?
I do have to say, it's amongst I've recently started looking into them and hearing about them. It wasn't in the debate that this was the first time that I heard about them. You could say that exploring the details of what those other views were was an endeavor that I took into in the past week or so.
Okay. I guess like we can continue to do audience questions, comments, concerns, or critiques, unless like the judges are ready. But also like for the record, I'm not saying it's a forfeit. That's not what I'm saying. Like I'm just kind of confused on what to do here. But then also like I don't really know what to do here. But
well,
like,
we actually we could give it to the judges, right? Like let the judges decide what they think we should do, and we go from there. If the judges feel like there was a concession during the debate, if they feel like there was a implicit type of concession, then they could judge it on that. So it's whatever the judges decide.
Okay. Yeah. We're gonna leave it up to the judges, and then also we're gonna get the audience poll going, and that'll be how we determine it. But let me see. Let me check. Do we have any guests that want to come up, or is that it for the? It seems like we don't have any guest or audience questions. So
we do.
Oh, like, is there any guest? I don't see any in the request.
Wait, yo, Coco, he's right next to you.
Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Hey, Justin. Sorry. Hey, go ahead, audience. Comments, questions, concerns, critiques. Sorry.
Hey, Leeman, so I know we spoke last time a little bit when you were live. Is this your first formal debate?
Yeah.
Oh, Okay, you did pretty well. Like, just like maybe two quick questions. What did you learn anything in terms of like maybe strategy or?
Yeah, I think probably one of the things that I should have seen is something about, we agreed to definitions of God, which I mean, I thought would be beneficial as opposed to harmful, because many people have misconceptions about what we believe about God. So one of the things that I wanted to do was define what we mean about God. So it kind of sounds like to me, what he was able to prove is that this God that is all knowing and powerful, is not necessarily the only thing that can be. For example, something else can exist that is not all knowing and powerful, but still necessarily exists. I don't think I was prepared to challenge that level of an attack against the idea of God itself. I was more preparing to attack the idea that there is no explanation for moral grounding. But I think what the interlocutor came up with was something that potentially could not be, not that he's actually believing in that, and I don't think I was prepared to challenge his something that not many people even hold on to.
Yeah, so I think the debate hinged on the notion of possibility. Are you familiar with like possibility and different types of modality?
I think something like something that has to do with logical possibility and logical impossibility. And so the debate would have to then show that in all possible worlds, it would be impossible that something other than God could define. When I was really young, I had a car ride, and as people who believe in God, I was with my cousin. We were both about 12 years old, and we said, imagine there's something on the other side of the world that defines morality, and that it tells us what's good and bad. Then we asked ourselves, well, who created that? And of course, we necessarily believe that God is the creator of all things, and so in this thing, other than Himself. So in this sense. Even this other frame that could potentially be, we would, as believers in God, believe that God created them, and this is the source.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, like
Yeah.
beforehand, did you guys like decide or agree upon what like modal scope you were discussing possibility in?
When I understood possible, I understood it as logically possible or impossible.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, I think it seemed as if though if that was undefined, right? There are different types of modal scopes you could have appealed to. It seemed as if though from the intro you let the interlocutor kind of dictate and pigeonhole you into a particular type of modal scope, like logical modality, and you'd had to show logical impossibility when you could have kind of pivoted that and probably used something else like metaphysical, right? Given your view on God or something, right? So it could have been logically possible, but metaphysically impossible, and probably debated from that angle. But that was just my comment.
Helped to adjust him. Even joining the other live, that helped me kind of ground, like, which way I wanted to take this from. So I really appreciate it.
I
So are the
had
judges
one.
ready? Hold on, Mer. So I just want to see. Are the judges ready to judge?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready too.
Okay, guys. I guess we could, just
Yeah,
whenever you
I'm
guys.
ready.
Okay, good. So then, whenever you guys are ready, we'd like to hear from you guys.
Don't mind going first this time, unless anybody else wants to. All right. So
Wait, hold on. Did Marisol want to ask something? All right, is he the next
No,
one?
we'll get to Mersault like after the judges
Oh,
could
okay.
judge. Yeah.
That worked.
okay, so the openers were. By the way, thank you to both debaters. The openers were really good on both sides. I gave it to Divinity overall. Divinity laid out all of the requirements for the debate. Your burden as well as his win condition. They laid out some arguments, the Euthyphro dilemma, and how atheists, how one fork of the Euthyphro dilemma allows moral truths to exist objectively, divorced from necessity of a god, whereas the other one would be divine subjectivism. they laid out different routes you can get to realism from an atheist standpoint: naturalism, non-naturalism, and relaxed realism. And then again reiterated the burden of the opponent. Leeman, you did a really good job. You laid out some definitions, which I thought was pretty good. You laid out, your definition of objectivity. You did also lay out a definition, I believe, of possibility, which then set the modal scope of the debate, which I think then hurt you a lot later because it was logical possibility. But you laid out the Islamic stance, God's mechanism of choosing what is objectively good and objectively impermissible, using some kind of mechanism of free will. And then you laid out some good arguments against naturalism, like the naturalistic fallacy. But you didn't address any other schools of realism. Okay, in the crosses, I thought this is where Divinity really excelled. In round one, Divinity reinforced the Euthyphro challenge. Said that if there is this second option, if there is this option where God is divorced from the moral good, God just knows the moral goods and they exist alongside him, then that this option is available to the atheists. They explained that abstractor would be one way of cashing this out, this relationship between moral truths existing unchanging. So that answered your challenge of things being unchanging. And then you were quizzed on God's reasons for selecting the good, because you select what Divinity called the divine subjectivism route. You said it's not divine subjectivism, but also that God has no reasons. So then Divinity kind of challenged you with a symmetry between that and abstractor that exists with no reason. It seemed that after that you kind of you gave a circularity critique, but this critique was symmetrical on your view, and Divinity kind of showed that you didn't have a symmetry breaker. You then kept jumping to you gave a syllogism about kind of God's us needing an objective ground in this world, but that missed the modal scope that you'd both agreed to in your openers, that it was a logical possibility and not just what is actually in this world. And so yeah, you failed to meet the modal scope there, and then Divinity kept reinforcing the fact that you were kind of missing the point. And then in the third round, yeah, you asked a lot of questions about whether you had met the burden, to which Divinity could obviously just reply no. So that was giving a rhetorical opportunity to your opponent to kind of school you on that. And then Divinity's third cross was kind of like a closing, right? They had reinforced that the requirement of the debate was possibility, that it was independent of Divinity's own beliefs, that it was independent of what's possible in this in this reality, or what's actually the case, that it was the modal scope was defined as logical possibility, and that the burden had thus far been you'd failed to meet the burden thus far. And then in your closing, even though Divinity didn't give a closing, you conceded the debate. I feel like you gave a concession. You said that you didn't understand, so you'd not defined God, and you'd not defined the scope of the debate to be non-actual, so things that are just possible. But the claim is clearly, is it possible without God? And so I feel like, well, I really don't know how to judge that closing, because I think it would be fair to give you both 0, although you did concede the debate. So overall, yeah, I give it to Divinity.
All right. Mind if I go next? Yeah, interesting debate. Thanks, Divinity and Leeman for doing it, and the host for having it. So yeah, I'll briefly cover some of the main points. I agree with a lot of what Mitch said there. So on the general framing in terms of logical possibility, yeah, I thought that was maybe an unnecessary concession to take that route, but I felt that the way Divinity framed the challenge was pretty good. I think he could have done it better. I guess the way I'd like to make this point is like, look, if you think that it's logically impossible, then you should be able to start with those assumptions, right, which are, by your stipulation, in conjunction a logical impossibility, and just with valid inference rules derive a contradiction, right? And you can't just add in extra logical assumptions, which is, I think, what your argument did, but you didn't really call that out. So, but the way you pushed back a bit later on that was fine. I thought asking for a contradiction that's required by the endorsement of those two theses was decent. Leeman's basic argument in the opening, I thought was okay. I mean, I thought he did an okay job of explaining why certain non-theistic views don't or are implausible or wrong, or perhaps are just inconsistent. I don't think, and I think Divinity did an okay job of pointing this out, that his case was exhaustive there, that he showed that those are the only possibilities for non-theistic realist views. So just generally on that part of the discussion, I think Divinity came out ahead. And as it came into the later part of the discussion, when Leeman basically agreed that, well, okay, maybe it's possible that there's a world in which God doesn't exist and there's other things that ground it. That seemed to me just like conceding the main point. So yeah, just I think a strong win on that issue for Divinity. And then on the Euthyphro dilemma stuff, I took Divinity's main point to be, look, either it's not a matter of whatever God commands, and so it's something independent of God, perhaps. In which case, well, you don't need God to have something independent from God, plausibly. In which case, that would be to concede his position. Or it is a matter of, whatever God decides to command or something like that, which would make it subjective and so not objective in the first place. And then the way Leeman responded to this, I took it, was to say, actually, it sort of is a matter of what God commands, but it's still objective. And you gave the details about how it's supposed to work, but it's not clear to me how it remained objective, except in the sense that it's independent of human values or standards, although that definition was not questioned. Just as an aside, I thought it was a bit strange the way I understood Leeman's commitments here about the moral truths. It turns out that the objective moral truths are not the contents of God's command, which would be the normal view, but just the singular moral command to follow whatever it is that God commands. That's the true singular objective moral truth. I think that's actually a consequence of what he said, which is a strange view, but it didn't really come up in the debate all that much, so I won't comment on that further. And then what else came up? Yeah, a lot of questions were asked about how the Platonic view worked. I don't think it's dialectically that effective on Divinity's part to just spend so much time on a particular example, because it's obviously the other individual's burden to explain why that's not logically possible, but whatever, I thought that was fine as far as it went. However, when it came to one of the main critiques of that was like, well, it looks like you're just describing something like God. Well, yeah, maybe in certain respects it's like God, if it's outside, not in space-time, and it's maybe necessary. Those are things that are in common with your definition of God. But if it's like God but not God, then okay, it still doesn't count, right? Doesn't really matter that it's like God. So I didn't see that line of questioning really going anywhere for Leeman. Yeah, I mean, I think Divinity loses a few points for leaving a bit early, but overall, I think he still did better. So I'll give it to Divinity.
Okay. And that was all three of the judges, right?
I didn't give mine yet.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Steven didn't
Oh,
go
that's
yet.
Okay.
5 minutes. I'll be right back. I need to check the call.
Oh, you're good. I need to lock in. I'm gonna okay. I'm like multitasking, but okay. Go ahead, Stephen.
So I think both of their openings were fine. I gave it to Liam. He stated the Eutropho dilemma. He mentioned moral realism. He talked about relaxed realism. Leeman, I think you stated your views and your beliefs, and that's fine. And perhaps maybe even like offer justification for it. But I would have liked to see more focus on the proposition, which was that moral moral objectivity is possible without God. I would have liked to see more focus on that and trying to derive a contradiction. So I gave that one to Liam. For the cross-examination, I also gave it to Liam. I think that I think Liam even gave an alternative view that an atheist could hold to, such as morals being grounded in the world of forms. And I think the way that you contended with that was that you said, well, this grounding sounds like it might be subject to either the same criticisms or it sounds very godlike. But I still didn't quite see a contradiction there. So I thought Liam had a lot of like pressure on you there, and then of course you ended up conceding. I wasn't sure how to do the closing, so I didn't. I gave Leeman a few extra points, but the winner still goes to Liam there.
Okay. And with that, thank you, judges, for your judgment. I didn't get the audience vote result, but I think that's okay because I mean most of these debates are going to be determined by like judges vote.
Yeah,
But
I got it on screen. I got a screenshot of it.
oh, okay, cool. I'll post it later. But thank you guys for. Oh, what?
86% Liam, I think.
Okay, but yeah, congratulations to Liam. Clearly, Liam was the victor for this round, and he'll be moving forward. In regards to Leeman, thank you for debating. I think you did a pretty good job. Your competitor was pretty fortified, but you did a pretty good job. Thank you for competing, and we genuinely like appreciate you for debating. And I guess the next debate's going to start at 7:00, so we can get like a couple of questions, comments, and concerns in. But Marisol, you've got the floor if you want to ask a question, comment, or give a concern or critique.
Yeah, first I would like to congratulate Leeman. Most people struggle with like their first formal debates, and he, even though he conceded a lot of points, he went against like Divinity, which is one of the best debaters on the app, like mentioned before. So congratulations, Leeman. Second, for next time, my critique for you is gonna be you need to define what is objective, because I didn't quite grasp your understanding of what objective meant there. It's just gonna be some what I understood was like some notion of like intersubjectivity for humans, but at the same time it's gonna be stance dependent on God's position. So for next time, I would like a better definition of objective. That would be it.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Marisol, and also the judges for all the feedback. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is my first, formal debate. So I think, I definitely was unprepared to deal with the importance of the definitions and all the things that could be, and it also gives me something to look forward to, as far as solidifying my views and refining my views and conveying them more correctly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, like, after each debate, people get better, and yeah. But thank you for debating. We genuinely appreciate it. We got a couple more minutes for any comments, questions, concerns.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations as well, Leeman. That was a really good first debate, especially against someone like Divinity, who is, as far as I'm aware, very practiced in debate. So well done, well done.
Yeah, I think if that was your first debate, you did very well.
All right. Yeah, if there's no one else, then
I think we have like one more person that's trying to request up, or maybe they accidentally requested. But yeah, our next debate is going to be, let me check the itinerary. I think Cease to Know versus Mob on whether moral realism is true. But check me on that, AR. That's going to be our next.
It's on the screen, yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But cool. Yeah, we're just waiting for them. We need to get Mob up here. We need to get Cease to Know up here. And while we're at it, while we're waiting for those guys, please, guys, if you can, please tap your screens, like the live, share the live. We appreciate you guys being here today. It is a privilege to have like 70 people in this live watching these debates, tuning in. So we appreciate you guys for that. If you could tap your screens, like the live, share the live. Yeah, we got 3 more entertaining debates for you guys. And yeah, we genuinely appreciate you guys being here and supporting the project.
Wait, Coco.
Yeah. Oh wait, what? You were asking your question?
Never mind.
Okay. And with that, Cease to Know is here, Mob is here. The topic is more realism is true. We can get straight into it.